So great to see you all here today. Thank you so much for joining our webinar to talk about National Network for Youth's Hill Day, which is the first day of our national summit, so Thursday, March 12th, where attendees can meet with their lawmakers and staff to uplift our collective policy agenda to prevent and end youth, young adult, and young parent-family homelessness. So I see some folks are already introducing themselves in chat. We love to see it and know who's here, where you're from, how you're feeling today. And please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box or throughout the presentation. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well, but just having it in the Q&A box is a little easier to keep track of all the questions, and we'll have time for discussion at the end. And the recording of this webinar, as well as the slides, will be posted on our new Hill Day webpage. So if someone from your team missed it, or if you need to go back and find some information, then it will be posted there for you. Additionally, I'll say Kayla is going to put some resources in the resource tab throughout. So the slides, the web page, other things that we'll share. So that's found at the bottom of your Zoom, where the chat and Q&A and everything is. If you don't see it, just click the 3 dots, and that's the resources tab. So if you're not familiar with us, the National Network for Youth is a national organization. We work with young people who have experienced homelessness, as well as youth service providers from across the country on federal policy advocacy and community-based solutions to prevent and end youth, young adult, and young parent-family homelessness, as well as human trafficking. So if you'd like to kind of stay up to date with updates in our world, then I would encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, and the link can be found here. So our members make up the fabric of National Network for Youth. They are organizations and individuals on the front lines, including youth advocates, service providers, and others who work every day to prevent and end homelessness. And through our membership, you can connect with your peers doing the same work as you from across the country. You can access mentoring and consulting opportunities, stay up to date on detailed federal policy updates, and have the opportunity to participate in some really unique and high-level federal advocacy opportunities. So to learn more about membership, please visit the NN4Y members page linked here. So I wanted to just make you aware of some other summit activities that are happening in addition, of course, to Hill Day and all of the regular sessions. We have a few fun in-person activities. So first takes place on Wednesday, March 11th, so the day before summit actually begins. That evening in the hotel lobby, everyone is welcome to join us for a game night. Everyone can come, but especially YAB members. We're going to have our National Youth Advisory Council there, and really a great opportunity for all of the YABs out there to meet other young leaders from across the country. And we'll have games and coloring and all that kind of stuff. And then the next morning, so first day of summit, Thursday, we have our members appreciation breakfast. It's going to be across from the general ballroom from 7:30 to 8:45. And if you're not a member, but you're thinking about it, then you will have the opportunity to sign up to become a National Network for Youth member at Summit. And then finally, on Thursday after Hill Day, so after, most folks will have finished their congressional meetings, we will have a networking reception with drinks and appetizers back in the main room. So after your meetings, please feel free to come back, and we'd love to hear how it went. All right. Our agenda for today, and again, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A throughout. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, but we'll be able to answer them throughout and at the end. But we're going to start with just a general overview of what Hill Day is. Then we'll go into details as to how you can schedule and prepare for and conduct your meetings with your state team. We'll review our collective policy asks, so our goals that we want to focus on for our Hill Day meetings, and then finally, questions and discussion. All right, so what is exactly Hill Day? Well, This is our day, first day of summit, where you are able to meet with your lawmakers and or their staff and talk to them about your work, talk to them about the issue of youth homelessness and the issues that young people are facing in your communities, and bring them policy solutions, which we'll talk about, our policy asks at the end. So a really, really impactful day where you're going to have a chance to meet other people from your state and go to these meetings together, meet your lawmakers, meet their staff. So happening on, as I mentioned, Thursday, March 12th from 1 to 4 p.m. is we try to schedule or have you schedule the bulk of your meetings during this time. Sometimes they might end up a little outside of that block. That's okay. Whatever works best for you. And if you are a virtual summit attendee, and you would like to meet with your lawmakers virtually, then you can really have your meetings anywhere from, like the week of summit to week after summit, just kind of close to Hill Day is fine. You have some more flexibility there. Where is Hill Day taking place? Well, your meetings will happen in your lawmakers' DC offices. So as you are scheduling your meetings, they will tell you where you should meet them. There are 3 Senate office buildings and 5 House office buildings, all in the Capitol Hill area. All are about a 15-20 minute walk from the hotel. And we have some more information about the different office buildings in our Capitol Hill FAQ resource. And then finally, who can participate in Hill Day? Anyone who is a registered summit attendee is welcome to join Hill Day. When you registered, you should have indicated if you are going to Hill Day, yes, no, or unsure. If you indicated yes or unsure, you should have already received, hopefully, at least one email from me detailing some next steps. If you're no longer attending Hill Day, but you got those emails, please let me know and I will remove you from my email list so you don't get those ones anymore. But if you haven't received emails from me yet and you do want to go to Hill Day, email me like towards the end of this week so we can get you added to your state team. And just to clarify that, you all will work with your state teams to schedule your meetings. And we have many resources for you as to how to do that, and we'll go over it in detail, here today. We can provide you with contact information for your lawmakers' offices, and of course, we're here to help you as well. But you're definitely going to be working actively with your team to plan and schedule your meetings. So if you got that email, please look for it, respond, connect to your state team to really get things kicked off, because we want to start scheduling this week and next week. I wouldn't wait later than, end of next week. So the way we organize Hill Day, as I mentioned, everyone is divided into their state teams. So last week I sent an email to most states connecting you to other attendees. Other states, if you haven't heard from me yet, will hear from me today or tomorrow. And some teams have a state captain. These teams that are listed here, if you're in this state, then you'll hear from your state captain this week to kind of get things started. And typically state teams will do their 2 Senate meetings together, since you all have the same 2 senators. And your House meeting you will do with anyone from your team who's on the same district, since you might not all have the same House representative. If you're unsure of who your lawmaker is, you can use our legislator lookup tool that's linked here. You probably want to use your organization's address instead of your personal address, since you're going to be talking about your work. All right, so that's a little overview of Hill Day. Let me take a look here. Lisa or anyone, if you are interested in becoming a state captain, please email me, and you can find my email on the Hill Day webpage. We have over 200 people coming to Hill Day, so we appreciate all the help that we can get in organizing everyone. So please send me an email if you're interested in that. And I'm just gonna look. Okay. All right, so we'll have time again for questions at the end. And before we get started in kind of the step-by-step of scheduling, preparing for, and conducting your meeting, I just first want to mention all of the many, many resources that we have available for you to help you prepare. So the first is the Hill Day webpage. Everything's posted here. And as I mentioned, the recordings and the slide from this webinar will be posted there, later this week or early next week. So please share if someone from your team was unable to join us today. One of the resources that you'll find on there is that Capitol Hill FAQ, just basic information about what to expect when you're at the Capitol, how do you go through security, can you bring food, map of the area, all of that kind of stuff. And then two really important resources to help you do everything related to your meetings. The first is about preparing. So how do you decide what you're going to meet about? There's a little info about lobbying versus advocacy. And importantly, template meeting agenda so that you can really be prepared and organized for your meetings. The other resource is for scheduling and conducting your meetings. So there's two email templates, one that you can use to reach out to your lawmakers' offices to schedule the meeting, and another email template to follow up after the meeting. And it also has some info about what you can expect in this 30-minute meeting. And then finally on the webpage, you'll find our fact sheets for all of our policy asks, which we will go over towards the end here today. And we will have printed versions of these fact sheets available for you to take to your meetings. So on Thursday morning, just come up to the Hill Day table in the registration area and we'll have those available for you to take. All right, so now we'll dive into everything that you're going to need to do to prepare for your meetings, to schedule your meetings, and conduct a successful meeting. I know many of you on here, I'm sure, are very seasoned and have done these meetings a million times. Maybe some of you have never done them before. So we'll just review everything to expect. And really, it's pretty straightforward. And lean on your team as a resource. You might have someone on your team who is very seasoned. And in addition to that, I am here as a resource as well. Please always feel free to email me if you need something or have questions. You're not all on your own as you're doing this. We are here to help you. So please feel free to reach out. All right, so we're going to walk through each of these steps to prepare, schedule, and conduct your meeting. First things first, connect with your state team. Again, you should have received an email from me, or you will soon, or from your state captain, connecting you to all the folks who are on your state team. And at lunch on Thursday, we will divide the main room up by state. So we'll put little placards on each table for the different states. So you'll also have a chance to sit with your team members and meet with them in person, and finalize anything before your meetings. But before that, kind of most of the correspondence will be happening over email. So be sure to keep an eye on your email for any state updates. Then next, with your team, you want to think about what do you want to meet with your lawmaker about. As I mentioned, we have our kind of 4 collective primary policy asks that we'll talk about in a bit. But how do you choose which one you want to talk about? Ultimately, it's up to you and your team. This is your meeting. But just some things to consider include what committee is your lawmaker on? They're going to have the most power over the issues that are overseen by the committees that they sit on. And you can just, Google your lawmaker's name, committee assignments, and you'll be able to find that. Consider what's happening right now in your community. Maybe did a program lose funding or shut down? Is your PIC count showing that homelessness is on the rise? Did you have, some good news, maybe a resolution in your city to prevent and end homelessness? Any of these kinds of things are also good information to share with your lawmaker. Consider if there's any unique perspectives or expertise on your team that you really want to highlight. For example, we have some teams that have a lot of McKinney-Vento liaisons and some that are even bringing parents and students. So you might want to, talk about McKinney-Vento program and the intersection of education and homelessness so that you can highlight that expertise. And then finally, what does your lawmaker care about? You can look at bills they've introduced or co-sponsored, what they've said in the news. Maybe they're really interested in foster care, so you want to take that angle, or maybe they've said something that like doesn't quite hit the mark when it comes to homelessness, so we want to do some, polite education on the topic. So more information can be found about kind of deciding on these asks in this resource, the Prepare for Your Hill Day Meetings resource. But these are just things to think about with your team as you're preparing your agendas and your talking points. All right. Once we have kind of an idea, it's also okay to reach out to get the meeting scheduled before you've, completely finalized everything you're going to talk about. That's okay. It's best to reach out to schedule as soon as you can. But that's our important next step. We want to start scheduling these 30-minute meetings. Definitely don't wait. I would do it this week or next week, especially because we do want you to ask your lawmaker themselves to join, and you want time for them to put it on their, really busy schedule. But do note that most meetings are with their staff, and that's totally okay. Sometimes the lawmaker joins, sometimes they don't, sometimes they just pop in quickly to say hi, but we want to make that ask anyway, especially since some of you are coming from very far away. So definitely have someone on your team or a few people from your team reach out via email or phone call as soon as possible. We have a resource in the scheduling resource that has an email template that you're welcome to use as you schedule these meetings. Now, if you are on a team with a state captain, then your state captain is going to schedule your team's 2 Senate meetings. And they will connect you with anyone from your House district, give you whatever information you need to schedule your own House meetings, or they'll support you, in other ways. If you are on a team without state captain, again, you should have received an email from me, or you will soon. I can give you the contact info, so someone from the team can schedule the meetings, or, we can send like the initial email and then someone from the team just kind of takes on the scheduling from there. So we can decide all of that via email. So just look out for those emails from me. As you're scheduling, though, importantly, be sure to leave enough time to walk in between the offices, especially if you are going between the House and the Senate office buildings, since, they're farther apart and you'll need to go through security again. All right, next up, very importantly, you want to meet with your team to put together your meeting agendas and talking points. So work together to schedule a Zoom call or whatever to determine what the roles are in your meeting. So who's leading things, who's kicking it off, who is speaking in this meeting, who's taking pictures, who's taking notes, what order are we speaking in, how long is each person speaking, who are we meeting with. All of this information is so, so important for you to be prepared. Definitely don't skip this step. Working with your team to put together a meeting agenda is really, really important because you are running the meeting. The lawmaker and their staff are just there to listen. They don't run the meeting. So they're going to look to you to start it off. They're going to look to you to just kind of keep it going. So you really want to make sure you know when everyone is speaking, who's starting it. You want to make sure your talking points are aligned and that you're on topic. All of this important stuff you do by putting together a meeting agenda. It is, unfortunately, can be quite obvious when you are in a meeting and, not totally prepared. There can be some silences, maybe someone's talking for too long and now someone has to cut their talking points, all of that. So really make time to meet with your team, maybe about 2 weeks before Hill Day, so you really have a chance to prepare. I am happy to join your team prep meeting if you would like, but you're also welcome to have the meeting without me. It's really up to you. And we have the template meeting agenda linked here. So this is what you can this is actually what we use when we put together meetings. So feel free to use whatever's helpful for you in that. All right. As we approach Hill Day, you'll want to share a final itinerary with your team and please with National Network for Youth. Of course, you want to make sure everyone on your team knows what time the meetings are, where they are, who you're meeting with, and who is attending each meeting. And again, please make sure that you send that info to me as well. I have a big master list where we have all the meetings that are happening because, we always have folks coming to us and asking when their meetings are. So it's a very, very helpful list for us to have on Hill Day, but we also use that information in our continued advocacy throughout the year. So we can say, oh, they met with this staffer about this and it went well, or they had this question, all that kind of information is useful to us throughout the year as well. All right. Then, of course, we are having our meetings. Again, they're only 30-minute meetings, so they're really very straightforward, especially since you will have all prepared talking points in your meeting agendas. And again, you are leading the meeting, which is why it's so important to know everyone's roles, who is the lead speaker, who else is speaker, what order, how long, all of that. So your team just shows up to the office, try to get there, 5 to 10 minutes early. You just check in with the staff that's sitting behind the computers. They'll want to know who you are and who you are scheduled to meet with. So try to remember the staffer who you were emailing with, so you can tell them who you're meeting with. And then they'll take you into whatever room they have you meeting in. And then the lead speaker will kick off the meeting, brief intros from the team, why you're there today, and then you just go through all your other speakers in the order that you've decided with your meeting agenda. Then you want to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. And, some staff are more talkative and the meeting is like more conversational. They're asking questions throughout. Some staff are just listening and taking notes and maybe they don't have questions. It really just depends on the staffer. And you'll also have someone ask at the start if it's okay to take pictures. So take some action shots throughout. If you can, take a picture with the staff member at the end of the meeting. They are very used to this, so don't be afraid to ask. It's very normal for them to take a picture with the group at the end. And definitely, if your lawmaker shows up to the meeting, then please ask if you can get some pictures with the lawmaker. Again, they're politicians. They get their picture taken all the time. So definitely okay. And please share any pictures with NM for Why. We love to see those. And then finally, the lead speaker just wraps up the 30-minute meeting. Thank you for meeting with us. We'll follow up. And that's really it. It's pretty easy and straightforward. Again, especially when you've prepared, everyone knows what their role is, when they're speaking, and it's just easy to have a smooth meeting when you are prepared. All right. Last step is to follow up. So sending a follow-up email to the staffer you met with is definitely very, very important. And we have, of course, a template email that you can use here, but tailor it to your needs. Sometimes your follow-up is really straightforward and you just say, thank you for meeting with us about XYZ. Let us know if you have any questions. But sometimes you might have talked about some additional things in the meeting that you want to add on, data or whatever it is. But just don't forget to designate someone to send a follow-up email and include the team on that email. And I would try to do it, early the week after Hill Day. So like maybe Monday after Hill Day if you can't do it right away. And then another follow-up we ask from you is to have somebody from your team complete one of these Google Forms per meeting. And we'll also link this on the Hill Day page. I don't think it's on there yet, but we'll add it to the Hill Day page. And this is for National Network for Youth, so we can know how it went, who you met with, what you talked about. Did they have questions? What were those questions? Did they seem interested in something? Like any information that you can share with us. And again, we really do use that for our continued advocacy work throughout the year. So I would have, someone from your team do this as soon as possible, just so you can remember what it is that you talked about. And if you are participating in Hill Day virtually, then follow all these same steps. Really, the biggest difference is that you have some more flexibility in when you schedule your meetings for. So it could be like the week of Summit, week after Summit. That's a good window. So you can do, all of this on your own and just fill out the Google form to let me know how it went. Or if you would like assistance in scheduling and preparing for the meetings, just let me know. All right. Okay, yeah. If folks haven't received an email from me or their state captain, I'd say by like end of this week, then let me know maybe on Monday so we can see what happened. But I've emailed most state teams. There's a couple who I plan on doing today or tomorrow. So just let me know on Monday if you still haven't heard anything, but you plan on going to Hill Day. All right. Excuse me 1 second. I've never had allergies my entire life before, but apparently this year I have allergies. So everyone pray for me. Okay, so I know I've said it a million times already, but it's really so important. So it warranted its own slide. As Ben Franklin tells us, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. It is so important to work with your state team to prepare for these meetings. As I mentioned, it can be obvious when a group is not prepared. We don't know when someone's speaking, speaking too long, someone's going off topic, all of that we want to avoid by working with the team to put together a meeting agenda for each meeting. And each person who is speaking should have prepared talking points ahead of time. And I'll say too, some states we have really big teams. So, you might all go to the meeting, but only 3 or 4 of you are speaking, and maybe the next meeting other people are speaking. So just kind of decide that with your team. But, sharing talking points is important. Your team, as you're meeting to put together your agenda, you should at least have an idea of what everyone plans to talk about when you have that initial meeting. You might not have all the details worked out yet. That's okay. But just as long as everyone kind of has an idea, like, Darla's going to kick us off with sharing some data from the area. Then Cameron's going to talk about her experience with XYZ. Then, Trinity is going to talk about her program and how it does whatever, just at least to have a general outline when you meet with your team. And some people like to memorize their talking points. Some people bring notes. Some people read something during the meeting. Whatever you need to do to really feel prepared and confident is okay. And then finally, you can bring some handouts related to your policy asks. As I mentioned, we will have our fact sheets printed, so you can take whatever ones you need. But sometimes some groups like to bring an additional handout about their program, data from your area, whatever it is, that's totally fine. I would recommend just keeping these short and sweet, like 1 page front and back. I promise they are unfortunately not going to read like a long report or a long brief or anything. So if you bring additional handouts, just keep them really like brief and to the point. And if you can bring your handouts in a nice folder, that's just a little like bonus. You look professional tip. Yes, we will now get to, I think right now we will get to our primary policy asks. Oh yes, right here. So we're on to our last section here. Let me take a look through the comments just to see if there was anything I missed. If you are looking for the resources and the slides, if you go to the resources tab, it should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see it, click the three dots more and then click resources. And Kayla's been putting all of the information in there. We have a meeting with Senator Schiff in the Yosemite conference room. I don't know, Marty. I don't know. I would Google it maybe, or just maybe ask the staff. That sounds fancy and cool. I've never been in there. Yes, if you're a Team California on here, Josh Cello is your team captain, a seasoned team captain. And I have one in here. How do you know who's heading the state team if you haven't heard from anyone at all? If you haven't heard from anyone yet, I apologize. You might be one of those teams that I still need to email this week, or we might have just gotten your registration updated. There's some folks who we didn't have full registration info for. So again, if anyone hasn't heard anything from me or their state captain, by the end of this week, then please reach out to me on Monday so we can see what's going on. Washington State doesn't have a captain, Aaron. If you're interested, the job is open. But no, there's no Washington State captain yet. Love that. Yeah, Angie from Idaho has been killing it already with scheduling meetings. So go Team Idaho. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I can't remember, but I'll say it now anyway. As you get your meetings scheduled, please email me and just let me know who the office you're meeting with, what staff you're meeting with, where and when the meeting is. Again, I have that big master list that I add it to that we keep printed for Hill Day. Yeah, Melissa is in the chat. Melissa is the state captain for Nevada. Amber is the state captain for Michigan. Thank you, state captains. Okay. So we'll have some more time still for questions at the end. So keep them coming in the Q&A box, or I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well. So we're going to review our collective policy asks. These are our top 4 shared priorities for federal policy to prevent and end youth homelessness. And we just want to, bombard the Hill with information about these shared policy goals. And we do actually hear from staffers, when we do follow up, we're like, oh yeah, I remember I had like a bunch of meetings with people that day about that. So it's great when we can all come with these kind of shared goals on Hill Day. Oh, wrong way. Okay. So first, let me just take a quick step back. You might have heard me or others use the term asks. What are our asks? What are our policy asks? And this basically is, what is the purpose of our meeting? What's the goal in our meeting? Of course, we are there to educate our lawmakers and their staff about youth homelessness and about your work, but we also want the lawmaker to do something, right? We don't want our meetings to just be like, did you know youth homelessness exists? Instead, we want them to say, oh, youth homelessness exists, and here's what you can do about it. We want our ask to be very, very clear. So you or someone from your team is going to state it several times in the meeting. Just be sure to check if you have any restrictions on lobbying. And if you do, then someone else on your team who doesn't have those restrictions can be the one to say the ask. So someone will be, reiterating the ask, but also importantly, all of your talking points in your meeting should be in support of the ask. So it all really just ties together nicely. You're kind of united with this common goal during your meeting. The purpose of your meeting is just crystal, crystal clear. And it is okay to choose a few asks for your meetings. I wouldn't do too much just so that your meeting doesn't get like TMI. It's also okay, maybe you'll do one meeting about appropriations and another meeting about the Homeless Children and Youth Act. Just remember what we talked about earlier as you're deciding what your asks are, what committee is your lawmaker on, what's happening in your community, all of those kinds of things. But all in all, choosing a clear ask that makes the most sense for your team. It's what your team wants to talk about, and just getting clear on that so you guys can come into your meeting really, really prepared and concise. All right, so our first big ask is to have your lawmaker co-sponsor the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act. And co-sponsor just means they basically publicly sign on as a supporter of the bill. So there's no vote yet or anything, but they're just publicly signing on saying, yes, I support this bill. I like this bill. And RHYTPA, the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act, reauthorizes and updates the current Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program, which is, one of the only federal funding opportunities for youth homelessness programs. So the bill would make many updates to the current Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program. All of the updates came directly from young leaders and from RHY providers. Some of the updates include what I have listed here, but you can see a full list of the updates on the RHY TPA fact sheet. But some of the big ones would allow current RHY grantees the option of applying for an additional $75,000 to provide preventative services. So, if you're applying for one of the other RHY grants, like a basic center, then you could also apply for this additional $75,000 for preventative services. The bill would also extend the allowable length of stay in basic center programs from 21 to 30 days. It would increase the eligible age for transitional living programs and maternity group homes from 22 years old to 25 years old. So these programs would be able to serve youth up to 25, while still prioritizing if you have youth under 22. And the committee that this bill goes through, the two committees that have jurisdiction or who oversee this bill are the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Education and Workforce Committee. So if your senator is on the Judiciary Committee, or if your House member is on the Ed and Workforce Committee, this could be a good option for you to consider. Or if you are an RHY provider, if you receive funding, or even maybe if you did receive funding, you just lost funding from this last grant cycle, this could be a good option to consider for your meetings. Next up is to co-sponsor, so again, sign on as a show of support for the Homeless Children and Youth Act. And this aligns the federal definitions of homelessness so that those who are experiencing hidden homelessness could be assessed for HUD homeless assistance. Right now, because HUD has a different definition of homelessness, it excludes many people who are experiencing hidden homelessness from accessing those services. So that's one thing. It would also require annual data to be collected and published on children, youth, and families that are experiencing hidden homelessness. And that data would have to be shared by HUD to Congress. And this is important for several reasons, but one of the reasons is, if Congress has a more accurate picture of how many people are actually experiencing homelessness, including hidden homelessness, then they are more likely to provide more funding for these programs because they have a better idea of the actual scope of homelessness. And then finally, this bill would allow communities to spend their federal HUD funding in a way that is cost-effective, most cost-effective, and best aligns with their community plan to prevent and end homelessness. So if that community has decided that, targeting children, youth, and families is the way that they want to end homelessness, then they would be allowed to use their federal funding in that way instead of the kind of national prioritization. Now, this is like a big bill. It makes a lot of big changes. It's a great option if, maybe in your work or in your personal experience, you were not able to access, or you can't help a young person or a family access access HUD homeless assistance because of that definition of homelessness. Also a great option if your senator is on the Senate Banking Committee, or if your House member is on the Finance Committee or the Education and Workforce Committee. On the House side, it's 2 committees. So just, again, you can Google your lawmaker's name plus committee assignments to see what committees they're on. We also have the Housing for Homeless Students Act. This bill would allow college students or student veterans who have experienced homelessness before the age of 26. It would allow them to live in low-income housing tax credit housing while remaining in school full-time. So LIHTC housing is just an affordable housing option. But right now, if you're a college student, you can only live in this housing and be in school part-time. But we would like our students to be able to go to school full-time, and there are already some exceptions to this rule. So we're just adding students who have experienced homelessness to that kind of list of exceptions. Now, this one is a little unique because there is no, as you can see, no bill number. There isn't a bill that's been introduced yet. It might hopefully be going through, a kind of special process in the Senate. So I'd really just consider this bill, if you maybe have experienced this issue in your work before, or if you have a senator or a House member on one of these committees. So that's the Senate Finance Committee or the House Ways and Means Committee. And then last up, we have federal funding for youth homelessness programs or appropriations. The fiscal year 2027 appropriations process is kicking off anytime now. So it's going to be the perfect time for you to talk about funding for youth homelessness programs. And we particularly like to highlight the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program, the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program, that's McKinney-Vento Ed, the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program at HUD, and the Youth Homelessness System Improvement Grants. So you can see these are our funding requests, what we would like these programs to be funded at in fiscal year 2027. Now, I have on here the kind of corresponding subcommittees listed here. So if you want to talk about HHS or Ed, then that's the Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee. If you want to talk about HUD funding or programs at HUD, then that's the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee. But really, since it is early right now in the appropriations process, it's okay to really talk to all members of Congress. They are allowed to submit appropriations requests to appropriations committees, and we might still have some time to do that by summit. So even if your member is not on the appropriations committees, then funding for youth homelessness programs could still be a good option. Okay. All right. So now we have some time for questions before we close out. So I'm going to look in the chat and in the Q&A. All right. First question, when will we typically know who's in what district for our teams? I emailed my interest in helping leads schedule a house meeting. I'm not sure. Quinn, are you in Ohio? Are you on the Ohio team? I think you're on the Ohio team. Yes, okay, I recognized your name. I sent an email like last night to the Ohio team because the team is big. So I sent like a kind of spreadsheet that maybe folks could use, although someone did email me and said they can't use Google. So we might need to think of something else. But I also have the information for who is in what district. So I would say if there's a particular office that you wanted to lead the scheduling for, then take a look if you can. Let me know if you can't at that spreadsheet. And then if you want, like you and I can connect so I can give you the contact information Okay, perfect. Also, okay, just, email the thread and say who wants to, go to this meeting, who wants to go to that meeting, especially because there's a couple people I know on the thread who can't open the Google Doc. So I think if you just email folks and ask them, then that would be helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Ohio team. Anyone else from Ohio on here? Massachusetts, Melinda, don't believe has a state captain. Um, God, do we have a team? Were you signed up for Hill Day, Melinda? I don't think there's a state captain. But let me take a look and get back to you. Yeah, Ohio team big. Melinda, if you want it to be you, then that's great. Okay, let me take a look here. Okay, Jazz put a question in here. For members of youth action boards, can you give a little guidance how they can best use their lived experience and incorporate into their talking points so they flow along with the asks? Yes, thank you so much for bringing this up. And this makes me think that we have a lot of great resources about strategic storytelling that we use with our National Youth Advisory Council and our community strategies team uses. And basically, it's like a step by step of how you can pair, whatever part of your experience that you want to talk about with your policy goals. So it'll be like step one, set the stage, where are we, what's happening, and all of that kind of information. So I think what we could do is post those on the Hill Day page as like a PDF, and then we can send an email out when those are up. Thank you for bringing that up because that's a great question. All right. State Captain Nevada. Okay. What's the type of data that can be shared? I assume you mean like what kind of data is good to share in your meetings, but let me know in the chat if that's not what you meant. But it really just depends on what your ask is as to what kind of data you share. So first of all, for your Senate meetings, you can share statewide data because they're senators. For your House meetings, if you can, sometimes it's hard to get, but if you can, try to keep it to the data like in your district. And really what kind of data you need will depend on what you're talking about. But let me just back way up and say most lawmakers and their staff don't know almost anything about the issue of youth homelessness. They've never had someone talk to them about it. They're just kind of thinking of it as like homelessness in general and not really understanding like the specific like youth, young adult, young parents portion of it. So whenever you're putting together your talking points and thinking about what kind of info you want to share, I would start like way from square one. Like, here's what we mean when we say youth, young people up to age 25. Like, really, really start with the basics. 4.2 million youth nationally experience homelessness every year. X number of young people in our state, all of that. So really, really try to keep it pretty basic. Some good numbers that you can find is Chapin Hall. So they have done national estimates on on the prevalence of youth homelessness. So that's where that 4.2 million number comes from. And we will sometimes put together estimates based off like state population data and then just use their estimates. So they say, like 1 in 30 I think 13 to 17-year-olds experience homelessness. Okay, so we'll use like the state population data of, I think it's 14 to 17-year-olds and just, multiply it by that estimate. So that's one way that we kind of do those. Another resource you can look at is the McKinney-Vento numbers. So these are the numbers that public schools collect on how many young people they have identified as experiencing homelessness. And those are kind of cool because you can parse it down by state, and I think you can parse it down by house districts. So let me put that info in here. And then of course your pit count numbers as well. And then I would just take, just a second in your meeting if you're sharing all of that to explain, like, here's why the pit count number is so different from the public school number, because they're definitely going to wonder why they don't match. All right. How do these, a question in the Q&A, the appropriations amounts compare to FY 26? So our requests haven't, hello, our requests haven't changed from our FY 26 requests, but these are, so our requests for YHDP and YESI, they're not much more than the current allotment. I think YHDP is 72 million and YESI is 20 million, maybe. So these ones aren't too much more. I think the McKinney-Vento Ed number might be like 80 million more than it is right now. And the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act request that we have 304 million is a little over double what it is right now. And the reason why this one is higher is because this is what the bill, the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act says, we estimate that making all of these updates to the RHY program would cost $304 million. That doesn't mean that they'll actually fund it at that, but we just wanted to make sure that those two numbers asked. And if you visit our appropriations webpage, we actually have a table that has all of the final fiscal year 2026 levels for these programs plus many others. So go ahead and check that table out for all those levels. I answered. Okay. Livette, I see you're from Puerto Rico, haven't received an email yet. Okay, good to know. I don't think I have you on my list yet. As I said, there's some folks who are still like sorting out all the registration for. So we'll take a look and I'll try and email you and your team like end of this week. So by Friday. And again, if anyone else has not heard from me or their state captain yet, then just email me on Monday, so we can make sure you get connected with someone. All right. And Florida, did I send? I think I haven't emailed Florida yet. So look out for an email from me today or tomorrow. All right. Know a lot of these. Okay, so Melissa asks in the Q&A, should we bring up anything about the programmatic changes in the HUD NOFO that is currently under litigation? A lot of these changes are on pause, but knowing that the administration may try to push these through again in the future. I would definitely, chat with your team about that. If that's something that is going to have a big impact on your area, then yes, I think it's worth bringing up. Especially if, we have, I guess if you can tie it to like your ultimate ask, they might be able to do like some report language or something like that to protect if these lawsuits don't, go the way that we want them to. Although I will say that even if the current lawsuits aren't successful that are kind of staying these different provisions in the HUD NOFO, I know that like the national groups are considering other avenues. So it's possible that there might be, even more pushback against these. But yeah, I think there's no harm in doing that, especially if it's in support of your goal or helpful to your policy goal. RHYTPA, we're asking them to co-sponsor and get, yes, so we're asking for RHYTPA for them to co-sponsor, yes, and get rid of some of the harmful changes in RHY's NOFO that occurred this year, such as education on two-parent households. That wasn't one of our like official asks, obviously, that we included in here, Melissa, but if that's something that you and your team would like to talk about, then absolutely is something that you could talk about. All right, I answered that one. Okay. What type of data would be shared to HUD in regards to HCYA? Okay, so if you guys are thinking about doing a meeting about HCYA, which is amazing, information that's really helpful for your lawmakers and their staff to know is the number of children, youth, and families experiencing homelessness. And you can really pull that from the McKinney-Vento Ed numbers. And it also, importantly, those counts show what percentage of those children, youth, and families are experiencing hidden homelessness. So then you can say, you know, we have this many experiencing homelessness, and this high percentage would not be able to access or be assessed for HUD services in our area. So that's some really good info to share. They like to know, well, like, are there alternative programs that would accept them? If there's not, you know, that's even more of an argument why we need to allow them to be assessed for services, and all of that. So something I would chat with your team about, if HCYA is what you guys decide to meet or at least have one meeting about. Okay. We shared hidden homelessness. Kristen, I'm not sure I understand your question in the chat. Let me know if you can elaborate. Yep. We also have, last year, we published a report and we did a webinar about young parent families experiencing homelessness. So I would check that out as well, especially if you're doing HCYA, because there's a lot of information in there about the impact of homelessness on infants and toddlers. And primarily who is experiencing homelessness with young parents are infants and toddlers. So another good thing to talk about in the HCYA meeting is, like, you know, the severe impact of that experience on young developing babies. Yes. Okay, great. So if you all still have questions, you know, I hope that you feel comfortable to please email me about anything that you need related to Hill Day. I'm happy to meet with folks, happy to work it out over email, you know, like whatever you need, please feel free to reach out. But I just want to give a few more announcements before we wrap up. So next week, we are hosting a webinar all about our kind of newly revamped and improved consulting and training services. These services are available to members and non-members, although members do get some free consulting time. Our offerings cover policy and advocacy, core youth homelessness topics, community strategies and facilitation, and advanced strategy facilitation. It also includes our amazing Youth Action Leadership Certificate. And we can do these trainings virtually. We can do them in person. Our community strategies team is in Hawaii right now doing a training, and all the rest of us are crying. We're so happy for them that they're in Hawaii. So please join us next week for this webinar. I hope everyone knows about our Vital Documents hotline. Young people or someone helping a young person can call or text, get help from a real lawyer in obtaining your birth certificate, social security card, ID, whatever it is. And at Summit, we will have flyers and palm cards available for you to take, so you can share them at your program or your school or whatever. And on our Vital Docs page, we have a big graphics toolkit that you can download, print other things, make social media posts, whatever it is you need. Tori, I hope the training went well. And thank you all so, so much. I really look forward to meeting you all in person, seeing you at Hill Day. Again, please feel free to email me with whatever questions you have, and keep an eye out for your emails so that we can coordinate meetings. Thanks, everyone.